welcome to Conversations with Kay. I'm Kay Ryder, and every week I talk with Vermonters who are leaders in the fields of government, healthcare, education, the arts, and community life. And welcome to our radio listeners, 99.3 FM, WBVT LP. Our guest is Cristina Alicea, and she is the producing and artistic director of the Vermont Stage. Welcome.
Thanks, Kay. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you back again. You're over 25 years now in business, and that's a great milestone.
It's incredible, and this is the beginning of our, starting in the fall, 26th season.
And how long have you been with the Vermont Stage Company?
I'm sort of shocked now when I say it. I can't believe it, but this is the beginning of my 9th season.
Good for you. Good for you.
Right?
Yeah.
It just feels like it flew by all these years. Yeah.
Well, we have such great shows. I can see how the seasons would just fly by. And now, where do your performances take place, Cristina?
So we are based out of Main Street Landing Performing Arts Center, and we perform out of the Black Box Theater there, and it's a wonderful space.
And that's in Burlington?
That is in Burlington. It's at the waterfront.
At the waterfront. Why do you like this site?
I like it because it is, two reasons. One is I think that it meets our patrons' needs better. We have a separate lobby bar area, and previously in our past space we didn't. And so, especially in the winter months when it's cold outside, a lot of people would be lining up out the door. And now they can come in and they can relax and have a coffee or a little snack and sit, and there's a fireplace and you can sit on the couches and relax a little bit and have conversation amongst other patrons that are there prior to entering the theater. So that's for me like a huge perk and adds to the experience of seeing our shows. And then artistically speaking, the venue offers us so much opportunity to do just really interesting things. It has 14 or 17-foot ceilings, so we could do sets with 2 levels. Mm-hmm. We could even fly things if we wanted to, which would be absolutely bonkers. But it's just a artistically really exciting place.
Great. Now let's talk about your upcoming season. You have quite a variety this season. You start with a romantic play with some songs and music, and it's called The Last Wide Open. Interesting title. Tell our audience about the 2 young people involved in this play.
So yeah, it's a romantic comedy between a woman named Lena, who is a waitress, and she is sort of in her late 30s and starting to feel like her life is closing in on her, that she has fewer choices going forward and hasn't found the one. And then Roberto is an immigrant from Italy, and he's been working as a busboy in the restaurant, and they've been working side by side for many years and never really noticed each other before the night of the night that the play takes place. And it's really quite interesting. I sort of see it as like this mystical romantic comedy because it's told in 3 movements. So it's 3 different alternate universes and 3 different alternate lives paths they could go down, and so it's a really charming play. And there's music. There's ukulele. She plays the ukulele and he plays the guitar, and they sing some songs, and it's a really charming piece of theater.
Now fate comes in. Does fate come in all this?
Absolutely. It's it's one of the things that I like about it is romantic around the idea of destiny. That sometimes, no matter the circumstance, you're destined for someone or for something, which I find to be a really interesting idea.
I'm talking with Cristina Alicea, and she's the producing artistic director of Vermont Stage. Now we're talking about this first show you're going to put on, Last Wide Open. What is wide open? What does this title mean?
I think it means that, and we were talking about this briefly, that our choices narrow. The more choices we make, I think, over our lives, we start to feel that they become more narrow, and our opportunities sort of all head in one direction. And when you're younger, you do have lots of different opportunities, wide open choices for your life's path. And in the play, the character talks about how she feels that she's sort of heading to that last big crossroads where she could kind of go in a lot of different directions, but the path she takes may lead her down just that one life path, which is an interesting idea. And one could argue that that isn't true, and that's actually an illusion, right? That we do still have many choices, but we often get comfortable and stay on the path that we've chosen.
Yes, I think of the Robert Frost poem, Two Woods, two paths diverged in the woods,
Right.
then I took one less traveled by.
Right, exactly.
And that's always been about choices. Yeah.
Exactly.
And when you get older, of course, you look back and think, ooh, why did I choose that way?
Right.
Or, was I really fated to do that? It's life is full of choices, and many times you wonder if you made the right one.
Or you look back and go, I never would have met my partner or spouse if I hadn't have made that choice.
Right.
And then you're sort of grateful that you did.
Yep. You have music in the show?
There's music, yes. There's some singing, and there's guitar playing, ukulele playing. I wouldn't call it a musical. I'd call it a play with music.
Okay. Okay. Ukulele. We don't hear that very often.
I know.
like
That's one of the
ukulele
things that I
music.
like about it. It's so different.
Yeah. Right. I like ukulele music.
I do too.
Used to be just Hawaiian music. They used to think about that way.
Right.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It was this instrument that was very regional, and now I think.
Or an old college instrument, something like that.
That's true too.
Oh, okay. Now in December you have your 15th Winter Tales, and this is always fun. It's in the time of winter in Vermont when the days are short and it is cold and it is dark, and you offer people a warm and cozy evening and full of song, poems, new stories, whatever. You're having new stories this year.
Yeah, every year we try to have a balance of new stories, and sometimes we bring back stories that were popular that people loved. But my hope is that we're going to have all new stories this year in celebration of our 15th anniversary, which is huge. 15 years doing the same program, and it's just a testament to the audience loving it. They come back every year. And every year I wonder, will we continue Winter Tales? But every year everyone comes and they love it, and they sing its praises, and I said, okay, this is something that the community wants. And so we continue it every year, and it is just a really nice way to celebrate the season.
I think people like traditions, and I think when people get near their holidays, like you have Hanukkah and you have Christmas, and I think people just love to have the same thing happening.
Right.
But you do have one category of poems at the Winter Tale, and this year they're being done by the Young Writers Project. Could you tell the audience a little about that?
And actually, the Young Writers Project has been involved with Winter Tales for over a decade at least. They have, perhaps even from its inception, we've been collaborating with them to get young writers, middle and high school students to write poetry and prose with the theme of winter and the holiday season, and then we read them aloud at Winter Tales. So we do 2 different poems per evening, and we highlight the wonderful work of our young people.
That's wonderful. I think the best way to get young people involved in the arts is to have them write something or play something or sing something.
Right. Get them actually involved in the work.
Right. Well, that's great. Now, your next play is called Relativity. We can guess who that's about.
That's right. Well, that's right. Yeah, it is. It is the writer that wrote this play, Mark St. Germain, actually wrote our play Dancing Lessons, which was very popular. We did a few years back. And he has written a play based on an Albert Einstein biography that he read. And he was fascinated to learn, as I think perhaps anybody that has an interest in Albert Einstein might know, is that he had a daughter before his two sons with his first wife, and actually nobody knew about her. It wasn't revealed in his lifetime. It was actually discovered in 1986 by his granddaughter, found letters. And the letters revealed this daughter that he'd had with his first wife that had scarlet fever at the age of 2, and no one knows what happened to her. They don't know if she died of scarlet fever. They don't know if they put her up for adoption. It's really a mystery. And so the playwright sort of took that concept and said, well, what if she did live? What if they did, for whatever reason, decide to rehome her, with another family, and what would have happened with that, and I think that sort of is a really interesting jumping off point to talk about Albert Einstein's personal life in this play. So it talks a little bit about, of course, his scientific. His contributions to science, which were enormous and immense, but then his personal life, you wonder about some of those things, because he was, a well-known philanderer and didn't necessarily have high opinions of women in general, I think, and that's probably partly due to the era, but it is interesting. When you sort of look back at the man and think about, where he stands in terms of his legacy.
Yeah, well, he really shocked the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's pre-Einstein and post-Einstein as regards physics. There's no question about that. And he was also encouraging President Franklin Roosevelt to look into atomic energy.
Right.
So, but there were a lot of photos of him in his later life with his pipe and his gray hair, and he looked just warm and cozy person, And he's like a lot of other artists and scientists and a lot of people we know too. I mean, if somebody gets famous, are they good anymore? Can you be good and be famous at the same time, Cristina?
I think it's absolutely possible, but I think what ends up happening is we end up holding people to a higher standard, and that's a part of that too. Then, this person who is an icon and a legend in his day, he wasn't a perfect man, and I think that we don't like to look at the uglier sides of people, especially ones where we hold on pedestals, and so I think that this play definitely has a little more of a conversation about him and this fascinating history.
Yes, and he made his contributions when he was young.
Right.
You think about this. He made all his big scientific contributions when he was young, and the daughter would have been around in that young part of his life.
Right.
And then when he got older, he was lionized by everyone. So, it's an interesting, it should be a very fascinating play.
I'm really excited that we're doing it. I think it's going to start really interesting conversations about him. And folks that haven't read, biographies on him, his life is very fascinating. So that'll be hopefully something that, will lead people down that path too.
I was always interested in the woman in his era, Madame Curie.
Yes.
They were both, but she was actually quite a good person.
Yep.
I have not read a lot about her that I thought was really bad in any way. Mm-hmm. Except, of course, she and Albert Einstein were involved. Their knowledge that they had and the things that they did brought us the atomic bomb. But
exactly.
They weren't really doing the research for that.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely not.
No.
So anyway, I always thought she was pretty good. So let's hear it for the women scientists.
Exactly.
Right. The next production that you have is about a woman, a great, great musical artist, Sister Rosetta Tharpe. She was called Sister because she was a soul sister, not
That's
because
right.
she was a nun.
That's right.
And she really brought us a lot of the music that we have today. And she combined rock and roll with gospel.
That's right.
And a lot of people just didn't like that. Now, why do you think that was true?
Well, yeah, so Rosetta Tharpe was, they called her the godmother of rock and roll, and she really inspired all of sort of the white male rock and roll artists that, sort of got credit for that. It inspired them. Elvis Presley, has been known to credit his work to her. Mm-hmm. And so she really was a massive figure for the music world, but she was also African American, and she was a woman. And here's this woman who is singing, soulful music and playing electric guitar, and playing electric guitar better than anybody played electric guitar, and so that was both mind blowing and also an oddity of her era.
Yeah, yeah. She played what I would call a harsh guitar. I mean, she could really go at it.
Oh yes, and she
like Les
you look
Paul,
at
like Les Paul.
Right.
You hear Les Paul and Mary Ford?
Oh
I mean,
yes.
she could really go at it.
Absolutely, and you listen to modern electric guitar, and then you listen to her, and you see where it started with her.
Yeah, and she had many people she performed with, so that everybody. But the play you're doing Marie Knight,
Right.
was one of her partner for many years. Mm-hmm. And the play deals in some way with their relationship.
Right. So this is a fictional story centered on the very first night that Marie Knight and Rosetta Tharpe rehearsed together. And so it's a rehearsal of the music that they're going to play together. And really, it's just an amazing excuse to have two wonderful actresses sing and play music and pay homage to these great artists.
She's not well known. As you say, she was African American. She was a woman. But by being in soul music and in pop now, Mahalia Jackson came along after her. And then Elvis Presley, of course, and everybody else.
Right.
Right. And I think that was why she was not so well known.
Right. Which
is unfair. But she's getting her. This play, in and of itself, will help bring her back. I remember her. I do. And she was a marvelous artist.
And that's the reason why I decided to produce it. I thought, here is this marvelous artist, this amazing story of this person that, I don't know a lot about, and I didn't know a lot about before I started. I read the play and started looking into her, and so my hope is that it will, bring her back to the forefront for our community to remember or hear about for the first time.
Well, she is in several halls of fame now.
Yes.
They finally have, recognized her.
Yes.
Which they should, absolutely. Now I'm talking with Cristina Alicea, and she is the producing artistic director of the Vermont Stage Company. We're talking about her season of upcoming plays. The next one is called The Pittman Painters. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So that is based on a true story. So back in the 1930s, a group of miners in Britain decided they would take continuing education classes. And so that was something that the union provided for these miners, because a lot of times they started working in the mines when they were still just teenagers. And so they had very little education, and so they thought this would be an interesting way to to educate the minors. And so they took classes in all kinds of different subject matter, and then they decided to take an art appreciation class. And the professor of the class tried to teach them art appreciation sort of the standard way, where they're showing slides of images of artists and the work they did, and the minors didn't quite understand what was to like or not like about the work, and so the teacher decided it would be better to have them also paint and try art of those different genres, so they could learn it themselves and practice it and sort of see what it was all about. And what occurred was they ended up creating all this artwork that became really successful. And a woman, an art collector, came by and saw their work and ended up purchasing some things, and then some of it ended up in an exhibit, and all of a sudden these minors, who were literally still minors, became art world sensations. And so this actually happened in the 1930s. And so there was a book written about it, and then these writers turned it into a play. Well,
it certainly is an interesting juxtaposition.
Right.
Miners, coal miners, I assume.
Yes.
And artistic exhibits. That's very different.
Right. It's astounding, and it was an interesting period of time in the art world, because they were painting what they knew. They were painting images of the mines, men going to the mines, or or working in tunnels. You see images of a miner with a headlamp on, digging in the dirt. It's a really interesting, some of the work that they created, and actually, if you look at it, very good, which is probably why they became famous.
Art is in the eye of the beholder,
right,
too. Yes,
right.
Yes, yeah, right, yeah. Do you think that there is an artist in each of us?
Absolutely, I absolutely do. I think we all have something that we're passionate about. And art is just an extension of our passions, something that really drives us, and it's just a matter of us finding what that is, and sharing it with the world.
Well, my father always says, "Life is but a story told," and I always thought that was so corny. But as I get older, I think it's probably true.
Absolutely.
A lot of people are writing biographies now, autobiographies, and they aren't that old.
No.
I find that fascinating.
Especially politicians. It's how they make money, right?
We won't get into that.
Okay.
Never. Okay. Okay. Where would someone call to get information about your season? And I know you have a website.
Sure. So they could go to our website at vermontstage.org, and they can also call our office at 802-862-1497.
Great. Now, your last show, is the famous or infamous Bake Off, which you have.
The Bake Off.
The Bake
yes.
Offs. Tell us about this.
It's going to be our 9th year doing the Bake Off, which is also amazing. And this is a program I started when I came on board as artistic director. And essentially, we take a play. Hopefully, it's a play that people know. So it's a known play, and divide it into 3 parts, beginning, middle, and end. And I assign a different director and a different cast to each section. So if an audience member comes and sees the play, they see 3 different directorial interpretations of it. And it ends up being just a really fun evening. And it's sometimes completely wacky, and sometimes, it's heartfelt. You never know what you're going to get when you go see the Bake Off.
I can attest to this. We went to the 39 Steps.
Yeah.
Which is based on an old Alfred Hitchcock spy type story, and we roared. We just sat there and laughed because it was so funny.
Yeah.
Just great. Is it hard to find plays that you can interpret this way, with 3 parts?
It can be tricky. It can be tricky because it does have to meet a certain criteria. It has to be something that, ideally it's not a comedy. I think that tends, I've tried a few dramas, and I tend to find that comedies work best in the Bake Off. And ideally something that isn't a fixed set, that is, takes place in different locations, and so the directors can do more things with it. and it has to lend itself to kind of that flexibility that the directors need.
Now you direct shows for Vermont Stage. You have a certain kind of show that you like to direct yourself?
Oh, certain show. I direct the plays that speak to me. So I'm reading all these plays throughout the year, and the show that I can really visualize the most is often the show that I direct. And also sometimes I take on what I consider to be the most problematic plays, the ones that may end up being the most challenging shows. I take those on as well. So
okay,
yeah.
Is it harder to direct comedy?
It can be. It can be harder. I think the critical piece of directing comedy is you have to find the right people, the right actors. Casting, probably more than in a drama, is so much even more critical, because you have to have people that are funny, that naturally have comic timing. Because this isn't something that you can teach, and that's probably a hard lesson I've learned over the years, where I've cast someone who wasn't quite right, but I thought, oh, I can bring the performance out of them. And then I realized, no, you can't. This isn't something you can teach. This is, this magic comic timing is a gift.
Yep. It's like telling a joke.
Right.
Some people can really tell jokes, and other people can't.
Right.
There you go. It's
and
timing.
some people are funny, and some people aren't.
Yep, absolutely. Now, we don't have a lot of time left here, but Vermont Stage shows, even when they're funny, when I go to them, it always, even the Bake Off, it always seems to me that there's some subliminal message sitting there. We're trying to deal with people different than we are. Fun home, it was very funny. But again, you're dealing with a family that's very dysfunctional.
Right.
And that was a very dysfunctional family in many ways, but that they carried on. And that was a message for me. Everybody stumbling along, chugging along through their lives. You view people differently after you see a play like that. At least I do. I view a family differently. I view someone who's not in my cultural background differently. The dog in the night, the autistic person, I deal with that problem differently. Am I supposed to be reacting that way?
Firstly, thank you. It means I'm doing my job well. If that's one of these things that's your takeaway, because that certainly is intentional. Theater is an amazing art form. It's both entertainment and if you choose the right show, right shows, but if you choose certain shows, it has a social consciousness, and it really is, social justice entertainment, where you really are learning and not learning, but practicing the art of empathy, which is practicing compassion for other people. It does take practice, putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Well,
and theater does that so well.
You do that very well, Cristina.
Oh, thank you.
Putting someone in someone else's shoes. I hope we have a very successful season. Thank you for coming, and thank you for joining us on Conversations with Kay.